Yeah, yo, what's going on, guys? Seth Spartan here, nutrition, training, and hormone expert and Prometheus Pro bodybuilder with Prometheus HRT, the world's best testosterone and hormone replacement clinic. Use my code Spartan to save on either testosterone or HGH replacement therapy, or peptides, or Anavar, Anadrol, and the list goes on as long as you qualify. Guys, without any further ado, this is GHRP-2 unleashed like you've never heard it before. Guys, we're going to go through all the pros, unbiased, uncensored, literally everything you need to know. Then we're going to go on into the cons, again, unbiased, uncensored, absolutely everything you need to know. We're going to drop down from there into dosage, talk about dosing. We're going to talk about some medical dosing too, as far as other peptides. And then from there, we're going to finish up and talk about any extra additional information that people just plain and simple are either not talking about in the first place, or stuff that, quite frankly, people don't know. So guys, without any further ado, this is GHRP-2 unleashed like you've never heard it before. Here we go. Starting with the pros, GHRP-2 is a powerful growth hormone releasing peptide, which means what in the first place? Being a GHRP, that's where this comes from. So GHRP-2 is a powerful growth hormone releasing peptide, which stands for GHRP in the first place. So what does this mean? Which means what? GHRP means that this is a hormone which is a ghrelin mimic, or mimtech, which means that it is derived off of your body's synthetic natural ghrelin. So quick overview, guys, anatomy. I'm sure some of you guys know this, some of you don't, but regardless, it's probably important to go through this. So what happens naturally in the human body, in the stomach, when the stomach has been empty or is you're fasted for longer periods of time? What happens is the stomach, the cells produce a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin will then travel in the bloodstream to the pituitary gland, where it will then activate ghrelin receptor sites, and by binding to the pituitary, will release what? You guys guessed it, a pulse of growth hormone into the body, right? So that's how ghrelin naturally works in the human body in response to fasting or stomach emptying. So in the case of GHRPs, whether it's GHRP-6, GHRP-2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, all the growth hormone releasing peptides, not to be confused with growth hormone releasing hormones like samorelin, CJC-1295 DAC, CJC-1295 no DAC. We got to put the growth hormone releasing hormones in one category, and we've got to put the GHRPs and the growth hormone releasing peptides in a different category. They're two different things. We'll talk about a little bit more on them in a little bit later, to talk about, why they're different, how they're different, and how you can use them together. Anyways, in terms of GHRP-2, guys, GHRP-2 unleashed, it is a powerful growth hormone releasing peptide. It's a ghrelin mimic, which means that it's based off of your body's synthetic and natural ghrelin. What scientists did was they saw, okay, think about this, guys. With testosterone and anabolic steroids, testosterone is your body's root hormone, and by class it is an anabolic steroid. What scientists did, though, is from testosterone or DHT or other androgens in the human body, what they did was they took the base hormone and then they made a derivative off, which is pretty much every other anabolic steroid in existence. In the same way, it's the same exact thing in terms of the body's natural ghrelin. They saw, okay, ghrelin produced naturally by the body to do what? Basically, signal to the body, we're out of food, activate a starvation mechanism, depending on how much ghrelin is produced, and also to do what? Ghrelin stimulates human growth hormone production from the pituitary gland. So what scientists figured out, and what people figured out is that if they take ghrelin and they basically synthetically change it, in laboratories, guess what? They can make a hormone like ghrelin that will still stimulate the growth hormone receptor sites, but without causing the negatives that you wouldn't want. So basically, in a long story short, you have something that can cause large amounts of human growth hormone release without the cons. Obviously, when talking about cons, GHRP-6, GHRP-2, while they are potent and powerful, has to be said, growth hormone releasing peptides, GHRP-6 and 2 still have a lot of cons. They're not refined down enough. GHRP-2 is much better than GHRP-6 in terms of cons. We will get into that shortly. And guys, it really comes down to this also. This has to be said. Pay attention here. GHRP-6 is a first class or first generation growth hormone releasing peptide, okay? What does this mean? It means it's the first one of the first tries, the first attempts at refining a specific hormone, growth hormone releasing peptide down from ghrelin into a growth hormone specific hormone, really. So GHRP-6 would be a first class, GHRP-2 would be a second class, meaning that they've worked on it, it's more specialized, it's more advanced, it's more refined down. GHRP-2, therefore, and also looking at the cons, which we'll do in a second, GHRP-2 is far more advanced and better overall for stimulating growth hormone release and also reducing the cons, which we're going to get into. Some of the cons being the cons being fat storage with GHRP-6 and also lethargy and hunger. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So all you need to know really, guys, in this category is that GHRP-2 is a powerful growth hormone releasing peptide. It's a ghrelin mimic, meaning it's based off of your body's natural synthetic ghrelin, and also it's a second class growth hormone. It's a second class GHRP, unlike GHRP-6. Having said that, GHRP-2 is not as advanced, moving in the other direction, it's not as advanced as a third or fourth class or generation GHRP like hexarelin or ipamorelin. The scientists hit the nail on the head the third and fourth try around, okay, with those hormones. We'll talk about why they're more advanced and get into detail in a little bit. And obviously, I'll get Unleashed videos out on both hexarelin and ipamorelin in the future too. Moving on. In the pros, GHRP-2 boasts a 30-minute half-life. What does this mean? This means when injected sub-Q, I guess this can be injected intramuscularly as well and also intravenously, but in terms of bodybuilding, fitness, athletics, for performance, you're going to want to stick to sub-Q. You could do intramuscular, but in terms of a 30-minute half-life-ish sub-Q, depending on genetics and metabolism, you'd really want to stick to sub-Q, okay? So GHRP-2, 30-minute half-life, which is nice. It's a little bit shorter than GHRP-6, but it's nice because in terms of, we'll talk about pulse pattern, but in terms of saturation of GHRP-2 in the bloodstream, you're going to be peaking, within the within the first 30 minutes of usage. So has to be said, 30-minute half-life. Moving on, in the pros, GHRP-2. Huge, has to be said, give credit where credit's due. GHRP-2, huge pulse of HGH from pituitary gland. What does this mean? This means that GHRP-2 itself will do what? GHRP-2 will release huge pulses of human growth hormone from the pituitary gland. Boom. So GHRP-2 is an extremely potent, powerful stimulator of HGH release, and that's going to be released, boom, in a huge pulse off of the pituitary gland after GHRP-2 binding. And obviously this is dose dependent in terms of the pulse you get from the pituitary gland. We'll talk about dosage too in a little bit, so you're going to want to stay right here. Moving on. Let's talk about pulse pattern. This is extremely important. So with GHRPs, whether it's GHRP-6, GHRP-2, hexarelin, ipamorelin, they all have slightly different pulse patterns, but they all work in the same way in terms of it's a single pulse pattern, okay? So in terms of pulse pattern, let's talk about GHRP-2 specifically. GHRP-2 pulse pattern, it's a single pulse and it's a peak pulse. Let's talk about this, and we'll compare this to other growth hormone releasing peptides in MK677 right here. So GHRP-2 pulse pattern, single large pulse, peak pulse, short pulse. So what's going to happen is, let's take GHRP-6 first. GHRP-6 is going to boast a big pulse, something like this. GHRP-2 is going to boast a bigger, higher pulse, but it's not going to last quite as long. Overall, are you going to release more HGH with GHRP-2 or GHRP-6 when we compare them milligram per milligram? That's an easy one, guys. You're going to release more growth hormone, more HGH from the pituitary using GHRP-2 over GHRP-6. And that's one of the ways which GHRP-2 is different than GHRP-6, is not just does it release more HGH, but it also has less cons, such as fat storage, lethargy, and hunger. We'll get into that in a little bit, but obviously scientists, guys, were not able to fully remove the hunger, lethargy, and fat storage from GHRP-2. It was much better than GHRP-6, but again, it's a second-class, second-generation growth hormone-releasing peptide. Scientists hit the nail on the head with this as far as removing fat storage, lethargy, and hunger from both ipamorelin and hexarelin. We'll talk about that in other videos. But anyways, has to be said, large pulse pattern. So GHRP-2, big peak, higher peak, more HGH release. Doesn't last as long as GHRP-6, but it's overall more HGH release with GHRP-2 over GHRP-6. Now compared to MK677, because in medical studies is functionally indistinguishable, that's the wording they use. MK677 is functionally indistinguishable from GHRP-6 when talking about mechanism of action on the pituitary gland, okay? We're not talking about half-life. Half-lives are different, obviously, okay? But in terms of function, it is, in the medical literature, functionally indistinguishable. Now, talking about MK677, why are we even talking about this? The pulse pattern. Pulse pattern of MK677 is not like GHRP-6, it's not like GHRP-2, it's not like any growth hormone releasing peptide. MK677, you get a slow kind of a shield volcano pulse, but then you get the effect of it amplifying natural pulses later throughout the day, acting kind of like a GHRH, which is a growth hormone releasing hormone. Think Samorelin, think native GHRH, think CJC1295, and think CJC1295 no DAC, okay? They all work that way. GHRP-6, because it has a long half-life, I believe in the latest medical literature on MK677, half-life was 4 to 6 hours, unlike the more well-known misinformation, which is 24 hours with MK. It's not true. It's more of it's closer to 4 to 6 hours, okay, based on the latest research. Go watch my MK666. Go watch my MK677 Unleashed video for more information on that. Anyways, moving on with this. MK, you get a pulse much like GHRP-2, GHRP-6, but you also get the boosting of natural pulses just because of the long mechanism of action on the pituitary gland. Moving on in the pros from pulse pattern. GHRP-2 has to be said. GHRP-2, huge HGH increase, huge IGF-1 increase, huge muscle mass increase, but little fat loss. We'll get into that, why that is in a little bit. Having said that, we have to talk about this. GHRP-2, large HGH increase, large IGF-1 increase, dose dependent obviously, and large muscle mass increase when talking about or comparing to other growth hormone releasers, okay? So GHRP-6 or GHRP-2 is extremely potent in this regard, okay? Period, has to be said. That's just the way it is. And when I want to say this because I don't want to knock on the scientists who created GHRP-2 that much. In terms of setting out what they were trying to do, with GHRP-2, they were trying to produce even more growth hormone release than GHRP-6 and ghrelin, obviously, and less sides. Did they do that? Did they accomplish the mission? 2 thumbs up, they absolutely did. They just couldn't go all the way like we'll talk about later on with ipamorelin or hexarelin. And that's really why ipamorelin and hexarelin are the 2 best growth hormone releasing peptides ever, with ipamorelin pulling out slightly ahead of hexarelin just because you can dose it more often. Hexarelin, you have to take days off between dosing in terms of desensitization. Watch my hexarelin Unleashed video. That should be out here shortly too. Moving on. Let's see here. Less cons. Moving on to the pros. This is a big con. GHRP-2 boasts less cons than GHRP-6, but they are still present. Go watch my GHRP-6 Unleashed video if you want all of the information. But in a nutshell, guys, basically this. GHRP-6, what are the biggest cons? We are talking about fat storage, we are talking about lethargy, we're talking about hunger, and also cortisol and prolactin increased dose dependent. So these are the biggest cons with GHRP-6. With GHRP-2, again, like I said, it's a more advanced hormone. Instead of being a first class or first generation growth hormone releaser. It's a second class. It's a second derived hormone from ghreline instead of a first like GHRP-6. So it's more advanced and it's better. It's overall better. I just did a video talking about halotestin unleash, and it's the same exact thing with anabolic steroids. The earlier anabolic steroids usually, they were good at the time, but the thing is that with anabolic steroids, the further we get in the scientific research studies and ability, and really the more attempts they make, the better they get at making anabolic steroids. That's why something like Anavar blows halotestin out of the water in terms of, if we're talking gain to risk, reward to risk ratios. So, it's the same thing. Later classes of growth hormone releasers, and in medicine in general, whether it's growth hormone releasers, whether it's anabolic steroids, later generations or later classes of drugs in general are more advanced and they're better than the earlier ones. Just why? Why in general? Because first off, more attempts, and secondly, more research. You're able to hone in more, get a more specific compound. Moving on, in the pros, GHRP-2 has to be said. Excellent safety rating. Give credit where credit's due. GHRP-2, just like GHRP-6, and just like ipamorelin and hexarelin for that matter, GHRP-2 has an absolutely incredible safety rating. Excellent safety rating. Just because it's based off of your body's natural ghreline, you're really not going to have, I have yet to, put it this way, I have yet to see a medical study with any significant issues in terms of safety on GHRP-2, okay? I haven't seen them. The only negative thing you could really see with, and I'm not talking lethargy and hunger and fat storage. I'm not talking about these. I'm talking about like actual health problems. With GHRP-2, the only health concern I can see with GHRP-2 is an increase in blood sugar, which is because of what? It's because of HGH increasing blood sugar levels. But if the thing is this, guys, if you don't have type 2 diabetes, and if you're not pre-diabetic, so no diabetes, no pre-diabetes, and if you're not super overweight and even if you're overweight and obese, you don't have to have pre-diabetes or diabetes. So I'm just going to say this. If you're not diabetic or pre-diabetic, without a doubt, GHRP-2 or 6 or ipamorelin and hexarelin are safe. But having said that, talk to your doctor before you do anything, okay? Moving on. Let's see here. Guys, that's it. That's it for the pros. So this is GHRP-2 Unleashed. These are all the pros. Now we're going to slide into the cons, talk about everything you need to know. So GHRP-2 with the cons has to be said, and these are going to be grouped together. So here we go. Biggest con with GHRP-2. Ready for this? You're only going to get a little bit of fat loss. With GHRP-6, you're not going to get any fat loss according to studies. However, with GHRP-2, you'll get a little bit of fat loss. Why? Well, this goes back to the ghreline mimic part, okay? We know that growth hormone releasing peptides, whether it's GHRP-6, GHRP-2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, they're all based off of ghreline. Based off of ghreline, your body's natural hormone, okay? Having said that, I'm getting pretty hungry. So my ghreline must be going up. Anyways, so they're all based off of natural ghreline. What does this do? This means, guys, that GHRP-6 is the worst, GHRP-2 is the second worst, but it's better, okay? GHRP-2 is like half of that in terms of, activating the cons of ghreline than synthetic ghreline or GHRP-6. So what does this mean? You're going to get only a little bit, you'll get some fat loss. You're going to get some fat loss, not as much as ghreline or GHRP-6, but that fat storage effect with GHRP-2 has been somewhat removed, maybe half removed. I don't have an exact percentage, but we know this. There still is a fat storage effect with GHRP-2. It's not as bad as GHRP-6. We know in medical studies, guys, that MK677 and MK677, like I said, is functionally indistinguishable than GHRP-6. So we know in medical studies, MK677 and GHRP6, you don't lose any fat. Why? Because that fat storage mechanism has still not been really removed from both GHRP6 and MK. Okay. Having said that, from GHRP2, more of it has been removed. So yeah, you'll get some fat loss, but your fat loss progress is still hindered because with GHRP2, it's a second class, not as advanced. They weren't able to remove that fat storage mechanism. And why does this happen in general? It's because it's because this hormone is still too close to natural ghrelin in the sense that it's binding and activating those receptor sites responsible for the starvation mechanism. What is the starvation mechanism? Well, I got to explain this now. So ghrelin is produced and released from the stomach into the bloodstream in response to what? Fasting for long periods of time and also stomach emptying. All right, that's what I'm experiencing right now. I'm ravenously hungry. I haven't eaten all day, so I'm experiencing this right now. So I can talk about this even more so. Having said that, what's going to happen is that ghrelin, which I told you about how it's produced and released in the stomach, enter the bloodstream, hit the pituitary gland, tell the pituitary gland, we haven't eaten, we're hungry, we've been fasting for a long period of time. Release HGH, but it's also going to trip. It's also going to trip receptors in the brain responsible for fat storage. Why? Because basically you're telling your body you're starving and you don't have calories available. So yeah, you're going to produce HGH to increase blood sugar and release HGH into the bloodstream. That's going to happen. That's great. However, you're also going to do what? You're also going to tell your body you're starving and that it should hold on to body fat. It's going to activate that mechanism, activate those receptor sites in the brain responsible for storage of body fat, because your body wants to hold on to that fat because it thinks you haven't eaten in a long time, you're starving. So that's where the fat loss mechanism comes from. And again, it's because they have not removed, they were not able to remove it from GHRP6 hardly at all. Again, it's a first try, first class, first generation growth hormone releaser. With GHRP2, they removed about half of it. They removed much more of it, but you still have some fat storage effect from GHRP2. So what I'm going to say here is in the cons, you'll have a little fat loss. Not no fat loss like GHRP6 or MK, but you'll have a little bit. Okay, so it's not completely removed. It's not terrible, but it's still there, period. And because of the same mechanism, which we just talked about, the starvation mechanism and ghrelin, you're still going to have a lethargy effect. One of the effects on the brain from ghrelin when that starvation mechanism is going to be tripped is what? Decrease in energy levels. Because basically you're telling your body, hey, you're starving, no more calories are coming in. Your body's going to want to lower, calorie expenditure. So it's going to make you more lethargic. That's where this comes from. And again, this is the worst with GHRP6 and MK, and obviously your body's natural ghrelin. Less so with GHRP2, but it's still present, so we had to talk about it. And obviously hunger. Natural ghrelin is going to make you ravenously hungry like I'm feeling right now. GHRP2, this has not been removed. Again, it's all working through the same mechanism. It's going to make you insanely hungry, GHRP2. GHRP6 is going to make you insanely hungry. Guys, with GHRP2, guess what? They have not fully removed it. So you're going to be less hungry than GHRP6 or MK or your body's natural ghrelin, but you're still going to be hungry, all right? So when people say GHRP2 doesn't increase hunger, that's a lie. It absolutely does. Not as much as 6 or your body's natural ghrelin or MK, but it's still present nonetheless. Moving on. GHRP2 increases cortisol and prolactin. This is another big con. So you basically completely remove this. When you get to ipamorelin, hexarelin, you still have some increases in cortisol and prolactin with hexarelin, dose dependent, but with hexarelin, it's not really significant unless you're cranking dosages up with hexarelin. So in terms of cortisol and prolactin increases with GHRP2, it's not going to be as bad as GHRP6 or your body's natural ghrelin or MK for that matter, but it's not going to be as much, but it's not going to be completely gone, as is the case with a drug like hexarelin or ipamorelin. Hexarelin can still cause cortisol and prolactin increases, but it's less when we're talking about dose dependent. So Again, it's just hasn't been, these hormones have not been refined down as far. Moving on in the pros. This has to be talked about. Desensitization with continuous use. So GHRP-2, it's not just GHRP-2. GHRP-6, GHRP-2, hexarelin, ipamorelin, all desensitize. Your body will desensitize to any growth hormone releasing peptide, period. Regardless what garbage information you hear online or these gurus or these people selling peptides or whatever are saying. Guys, I'm with the best hormone replacement clinic, arguably in the nation, and I've talked to the doctors about. I'm currently prescribed ipamorelin, which is again arguably the best growth hormone releasing peptide in existence. If you want to take this multiple times a week, if you're only going to take something twice a week, you get more bang for buck with hexarelin. However, if you're dosing almost every day, ipamorelin is by far the best growth hormone releasing peptide. You can get that at Prometheus HRT also. With combination CJC NODAC. That's what I get. I get it in a combination vial. Use my code Spartan if you want to save cash. If you don't use it. Anyways, having said all that, GHRP-6, GHRP-2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, all desensitize regardless of what people say. All right, some desensitize a little faster, some a little slower, but the bottom line, guys, is this. What receptor sites are you hitting with these hormones? All right, some are more dirty than others. GHRP-6, GHRP-2, more dirty in terms of they haven't been refined down as far to get rid of those negative cons we want, which we've been talking about at length. Okay. Having said that, all of them, absolutely every growth hormone releasing peptide, whether it's MK, GHRP-6, GHRP-2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, they all are made and designed to do what? Hit the pituitary gland, and specifically hit those ghrelin receptor sites on the pituitary gland to do what? To release large growth hormone pulses, period. So that's what we want. We want them to hit the pituitary and bind onto the pituitary as much as possible. Okay, so all of them do equally. Some bind a little stronger, weaker, but they all are designed and they all will bind to ghrelin receptor sites on the pituitary, and that's a good thing. However, because of this, what happens? Again, some more, some less, some bind harder, some bind longer, some shorter, but they all do the same thing in terms of binding. So what's going to happen? You have desensitization. Okay, this is just going to happen with continuous use, and there's no way if and or but around this when talking about growth hormone releasing peptides. Again, no matter which one you're using. So there's some that don't desensitize as fast, some desensitize faster, like hexarelin. Hexarelin you could arguably at the most use only 3 times a week. Why? Because you need days to resensitize, because that binding and that pulse is so hard in the pituitary, it desensitizes them immediately. You get the biggest growth hormone pulse, but the problem is you can't use it every day then. With GHRP-6, GHRP-2, and ipamorelin, hexarelin's the outlier here. I just gave you a dosing pattern for hexarelin. Anyway, even though this isn't a hexarelin Unleashed video. Anyways, with GHRP-6, GHRP-2, and ipamorelin, the dosing guidelines are all the same. Why? Because they all have a similar stimulation. With ipamorelin, stimulation is different in that ipamorelin gives you, not as high, but a longer pulse, okay? And a softer pulse for that matter. So it doesn't desensitize as much milligram per milligram, but it still does. However, having said that, GHRP-6, GHRP-2, and ipamorelin, all the same dosing protocol. 5 times per week, 2 days off. Monday, Thursday off. You can dose it 5 times a week, but regardless, you still have to take time off to resensitize. And if you don't, your pulses will just keep getting smaller and smaller. You have to take time off of these growth hormone releasing peptides. I know people don't want to take time off. I have a prescription for it. You're tempted to just keep banging it every day to get growth hormone release, but you got to remember, those receptor sites, guys, have to upregulate. They have to upregulate it again. You're not injecting pure HGH. You're injecting a synthetic peptide that's stimulating your pituitary. So you're not just injecting straight HGH. You're stimulating something to stimulate. You're injecting something that will stimulate your pituitary. So we have to let the pituitary upregulate or it's pointless. 2 days off per week for IPAM, GHRP-2, and GHRP-6. Moving on. We got to talk about the carb and blood sugar effect. All right, so one of the cons with GHRP-2 is the same with the other ones as well. All right, if you have higher than normal, well, even I guess the lower blood sugar levels, you'd even release bigger pulses. But regardless, if you have heightened blood sugar levels in the bloodstream, the HGH release will not be as great. Why? Is this because the peptide magically senses that there's higher blood sugar levels? No. Is this because HGH, will not be released because HGH somehow senses higher? No. The reason that this carb effect happens, the reason that high blood sugar levels from carbohydrates, or if you have prediabetes or diabetes, this would happen. But I'm telling you, if you have prediabetes or diabetes, don't use these. Okay, get the stuff figured out, and get everything managed through your doctor first before you attempt anything of this nature. And I'm sure the doctors at Prometheus HRT would say the same thing. Having said that, in a normal healthy person, if you eat carbs or simple sugars or anything, blood sugar levels go up. What's going to happen? It means it's going to trip the pituitary gland, or it's going to trip the brain, the pituitary gland, and I think the hypothalamus also. I have to double check, but you're going to trip the negative feedback loop on HGH, saying, "Hey, blood sugar levels are pretty high. We should not increase HGH as much." Why? Because HGH itself increases blood sugar. Okay, so the thing is that when using GHRP-2, GHRP-6, epinephrine, hexerelin, anything that is a anything that's a growth hormone releasing peptide, or secretagogue like MK, you need to have your blood sugar under control. It has to be normal. You don't want it spiked up because you won't get as much release. Again, it's a negative feedback loop. Moving on. There's no boost to natural pulses with GHRP-2. So any growth hormone releasing peptide, okay? Any growth hormone releasing peptide, with the exception of MK, because that's a secretagogue anyways, even though it's functionally indistinguishable from GHRP-6 in terms of mechanism of action. But anyways, having said that, with GHRP-2 or any growth hormone releasing peptides, there is no boost to natural pulses. They're growth hormone releasing peptides, meaning they stimulate the pulse. They do not amplify or boost them. The boosters would be like your body's natural GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, Samorelin, CJC1295 DAC, CJC1295 no DAC. These will boost your natural pulses, and also pulses caused by GHRPs, because they inhibit. It's like taking you're taking the dam lets some water in, but you're like opening up the dam to just let the floodgates, just let the water rip. Okay, let the water rip in. It's the same analogy with growth hormone. So, so you're not gonna boost natural pulses with GHRP-2 or any growth hormone releasing peptide. However, I want to go on the record and say this, because there's a lot of misinformation when I look through medical sites on this. GHRP-2, based off of medical research, not just medical sites. What am I talking about? These guru sites, okay? That's what I meant. But there's a lot of misinformation on GHRP-2. People, you'll see stuff like this online or in videos. You don't want to take GHRP-6, GHRP-2, ipamorelin, hexerelin, unless you're also taking CJC DAC or no DAC or Samorelin. You'll see garbage like this. Guys, that's not true at all. You will, in the medical literature, you produce huge bang pulses of HGH release with all of those GHRPs and all of the growth hormone releasing peptides I've been naming off. Okay, so that's a blatant lie. You'll get huge release. You just won't release as much as if you took GHRH alongside them. Okay, all right, or not GHRH. GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormones such as CJC DAC, no DAC, etc. So can you use growth hormone releasing peptides, no matter if it's 2, 6, IPAM, hexerelin? Can you use these all alone and get huge growth hormone pulses? Absolutely, but you won't get as big of pulses as if you use CJC DAC, no DAC, Samorelin, your body's native GHRH, such and so forth. Okay, just has to be said. We have to talk about that. Man, guys, that's it for GHRP-2 Unleashed cons. We went through all the pros, we went through all the cons. Let's get into dosage. All right, dosing. Let's talk about what I'm prescribed real quick. I'm prescribed pharmaceutical grade with a prescription from my doctor, from Prometheus HRT. I am prescribed ipamorelin 200 micrograms 5 times a week. That's, that's taking Monday and Thursday off, but, 5 times a week dosing that. So 200 micrograms of ipamorelin along with 200 micrograms CJC no DAC. That comes in a combination vial, with stabilizing agents added so they don't go bad. If you order some garbage peptides off of a non-medical site or with, non-pharmaceutical, they will not add stabilizing agents. But having said that, I'm paying, I think it's, what am I paying? I think it's over $100 per vial. But it's worth it because I can leave it in the fridge and it doesn't go bad, unlike, the stuff that they don't add stabilizing agents into that you get off peptide sites, okay? Anyways, having said all that, so what I'm doing is ipamorelin 200 micrograms with 200 micrograms of CJC no DAC. So in terms of the peptide, the growth hormone releasing peptide, I'm taking 200 micrograms. It's the same, this falls in the same ballpark with GHRP-2 dosing, okay? They're all binding to the same receptor site, some a little stronger, some weaker, but either way you want to hit saturation. So my professional recommendation as far as dosage to you guys is going to be this. Check with your doctor before you do anything. But this is my professional recommendation. GHRP-2, 100 to 250 micrograms per dose of GHRP-2. And that's the same dosage recommendation I would have for GHRP-6, GHRP-2, or ipamorelin. I would not... That dosage would be a little lower with a drug like hexerelin. Having said that, this is my dosage recommendation, 100 to 250 micrograms. Again, check with your doctor before you do anything, but this would be my professional recommendation to you. 100 to 250 micrograms of GHRP-2, 6, or ipamorelin per dose. And as for frequency, I already said this, but 5 times per week. Monday, Thursday off to resensitize, otherwise you're just going lower and lower in terms of HGH release. You have to take those days off, guys. I'm sorry. I know you don't want to hear it. I know you just want to slam it every day and get these wicked huge pulses, or you think you're going to get big pulses, but again, it's diminishing. You have to let the receptor sites reset and resensitize. Moving on. This has to be said too in dosage. If you don't want to take it 5 times a week, if you want to opt out for every other day, you can do that. You can take these peptides every other day. However, your dosing is going to be slightly higher. That would be 250 micrograms then every other day, okay? Because you don't have to worry about the desensitization issue as much because you're taking 48 hours in between every dose, unlike 24 with 2 days off per week, okay? So anyways, and yeah, I'll just wait to hexerelin to give you guys a dosing for hexerelin. I'll wait till I do that video. Guys, that's it for dosage and dosing as far as, and also my dosing. Moving on. We're done with pros. We're done with cons. We're done with dosage information. Let's talk about any extra additional information that you need to know, and then we're out of here. So with GHRP-2 Unleashed, extra. Here's the first thing I gotta say to you guys, and also say to myself. More is not better, okay? More is not always better. Why? Why is this? How can these things be? The reason more is not better is because you got to remember, and I guess even if you were taking synthetic HGH, there's a point to where more is not better, and you're really risking your health in terms of blood sugar and also, organ enlargement. I'm gonna have to do an HGH Unleashed video. That's probably gonna run me like an hour and a half. Oh boy. Anyways, but anyways, these are Unleashed videos. I gotta give you everything you need to know in one video. All right. So having said that, more is not better. Why? If you were taking HGH, synthetic HGH, you could argue more is better. Forgetting the cons of a higher dosage of HGH, you could argue more is better in terms of synthetic HGH. Okay. Again, that's not me telling you guys to use more. That's just I'm making a statement here. Okay, so do everything legally through your doctor. Don't do anything without your doctor's supervision, okay? Before I run on too long with this. Having said that, more is not better. If you were taking synthetic HGH, okay, with the prescription, right? You could say more is better in terms of benefits, excluding the cons. More is better, right? More is not better, however, with growth hormone releasing peptides, whether that's GHRP-6, 2, ipamorelin, hexerelin. More is not better. Why? Why? You could also say more is better with GHRHs, growth hormone releasing hormones. You could say more is better with samorelin, your body's natural GHRH, CJC 1295 DAC, CJC 1295 no DAC. More is better, right? So why is more not better with GHRPs or any growth hormone releasing peptide? Maybe I'm running this too long, but anyways. More is not better simply, guys, for the reason that your body has to what? Comes back to this. Your body has to resensitize and reset those receptor sites responsible for what? Boom, giving those large growth hormone pulses. So again, you're not taking HGH and you're not taking a GHRH, okay, growth hormone releasing hormone. You're taking a growth hormone stimulating peptide, which means that those receptor sites on the pituitary, they can only be binded so hard for so long until they have to what? Resensitize. So more is not better. You're better off taking a lower dosage, like for example, this is a great example. You're better off taking, we'll just use GHRP-2. You're better off taking GHRP-2 or ipamorelin 5 times a week at a lower dosage than taking a higher dosage 3 times a week or every other day. Why? Because, more often and a lower dosage resulting in more total HGH put is better than doing these larger pulses and you have to wait longer to resensitize. So I guess that's the point. Okay, gave you guys more information, but that's the point. More is not better when it comes to growth hormone releasing peptides in general. Moving on. Last thing you need to know, guys, and this is it. Last thing in any extra additional information. Why I will not personally use GHRP-2. Why won't I use it? Comes down to this. Fat storage mechanism. You only get a little bit of fat loss with GHRP-2. You won't get any with 6 like we talked about. But biggest thing, the fat storage is still there. The lethargy is still there. The hunger is still there. And you're still getting a pretty decent or significant increase in cortisol and prolactin. All right, that's pretty much it. And there's going to be people out there that say, well, you get the lethargy, guys. Well, here, I'll pretend to be, I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't make fun of them, but I won't make fun of them. But the thing is, there's going to be a lot of people out there that say, well, guys, the lethargy is caused by the large HGH increases. No, it's not. You might get a little bit of, you might get a little bit of tiredness, but the large lethargy increases. HGH is kind of like this. If your increases are super high, you'll want to fall asleep like a baby. But if they're, smaller HGH increases will actually give you energy. I know this to be true personally, okay? So here's the thing. These people that say, the lethargy is caused by HGH increases. It can be, but, with GHRP-6, GHRP-2, and MK, the lethargy is not caused by the HGH, most of it anyway. It's caused by what? It's caused by you stimulating that starvation mechanism and basically telling your brain, telling your body, hey, we don't have calories coming in, so we better limit calorie expenditure. That's what's causing the lethargy, guys. So the reason I won't use GHRP-2 is the same reason I won't use GHRP-6 or MK677. The fat storage mechanism, even though it's less in 2 than it is in 6 or MK, but the fat storage mechanism is still there. The lethargy, the hunger, especially if I'm dieting, I don't need the hunger, and also an increase in cortisol and prolactin, which comparatively I won't have barely any if I use Hex, and I won't pretty much have any if I use ipamorelin unless I'm super dosing it. So, guys, that's pretty much it. That is everything you need to know. This is GHRP-2 unleashed like you've never heard it before. I'm Seth Spartan. Stay safe, stay healthy, guys. Do everything right legally through your doctor. And again, you only have one body. So that's GHRP-2. It's been a pleasure. Seth Spartan, and we are out of here.